Welcome to Own It, the honest conversation about finding, starting, and operating your own business. My name is Nicol with Fran, and today's episode, we're going to talk about researching franchises. So, for the last 40 years, I've helped thousands of people find and buy franchises. And most importantly, I help them through the research process. And there's a lot that goes into that. And sometimes people circumvent some of the natural things we do in research because they think that they know how to do it or they have a simpler way or they research things the way that they research everything, like cars or homes or things like that. So, one of the things that I see is oftentimes in today's world, people want to go on the internet to do the research. So, we're used to doing that. If we want to buy a car, maybe we go on, we read forums, we Google, we read consumer reports and reviews and things like that. Same thing with a home. When we want to buy a home, oftentimes we'll go to realtor.com and we'll type in some filters and some homes will pop up that meet those parameters. And we'll scroll through the pictures and we'll click the ones we like and maybe save them. But when we're really ready to buy a house, we will probably go to a real estate expert and we will say, hey, these are the homes that are exciting to us. This is what we're looking for. And we will look at that real estate expert to help us narrow that field down and find the homes that really suit what we're trying to do. And I do exactly the same thing. The difference is I do it with franchises. And the first thing I help people do is find the right franchise for them. So we look at their personality, we look at their values, we look at their goals, not just financial goals, but what are their long-term goals. And there's a lot that goes into determining the right franchises to look at. But one of the things I tell my clients is once we find a few franchises to look at that they're interested in, begins a very detailed research process. And I tell people it takes about 2 to 3 months. So oftentimes what my clients will tell me is, well, let me just go online. Let me look at these companies. Let me see what they're all about. And I'll make my decision, based on what's out there. And what I coach them on is that they're probably not going to find much. Yes, you can go on AI and, maybe they will congregate some information that's out there on the web or through the franchise disclosure documents or maybe through some forums. But we don't know how up to date that information is. Oftentimes, that information is very outdated. If we go on the company's website, we really don't find much there. We might find a few videos. We might find some, information from some of the franchisees. But it really comes down to what the cost of that business is or what it's all about or how it works. There's very little out there. And honestly, there's a reason for this. First of all, franchises are very heavily regulated by the Federal Trade Commission. And in that, the Federal Trade Commission really wants people to do an organic research process. They don't want people looking to buy their franchise just what they see on the internet. And so sometimes my clients will call me a few days later after they tried to do the research online and they'll say, wow, there's just not very much out there or it's not very detailed. How do I really get to know what this business is all about? And I said, well, the first thing is we have to break it down in steps. And one of the very first steps I tell people is we have to talk to the franchisor and or their representative. And yes, I tell them, keep in mind these people are, their goal is to, sell you a franchise, but they also want to make sure you're the right fit for them as much as you want to make sure that company is the right fit for you. But normally they start off with some informational calls. They give you kind of that 30,000-foot perspective of what their franchise is all about. They give you a little bit of history behind it. They give you some of the economics about what it costs to start the franchise and how that's broken down. They may tell you what type of owners they're looking for, what characteristics they find are necessary for people to be successful in that business. And so that intro call is really important because if you don't like what you hear on the intro call, there's probably not much need to go any further with it. But if you like what you hear and you say, well, that sounds interesting. What's next? Well, normally they're going to want to do a unit economics call. And that's kind of broken down into two parts. A very detailed description of what it costs to start the franchise. And, that'll include the equipment. It will include the franchise fees. It will include the startup capital, working capital. everything that you need to start that business up, and also the money you're going to need to have on the side to get that business to profitability. So they're going to go over that. And oftentimes they disclose what we call an earnings claim. And this is actually audited information. So in their earnings claim, it's based on the information that they get from their franchisees in the past calendar year. So that's delivered in many ways, shapes, or forms. Sometimes it's just general information with the gross revenues, maybe their top 25%, mid 25%, bottom 25%. But some franchisors are actually giving bottom line numbers, what we call EBITDA, or earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization, what I like to call net take home. What are these franchisees taking home at the end of the day? So we are seeing that information coming out. So that happens in the unit economics call. Then they're going to talk to you about how they help you with marketing. They're going to talk about their training program. They're going to talk about how they support you. And they're going to give you a lot of information. And this might be 4, 5, 6 calls with the franchisor. Once you've gone through these, then they're going to send you the franchise disclosure document that I mentioned before. And this is a 200-page document that lists all their information. And they have to file this with the Federal Trade Commission, and they have to update it every year. And that's why I tell people sometimes when you go out and Google this, or you go to ChatGPT or something like that to get information on their FDD, sometimes it's outdated information. So we need to make sure we're looking at the most current FDD. So they're going to go through that with you. That's also something I help my clients with, so you understand what's in that document. And they just want to make sure before you start talking to their owners that you have a very good understanding of what the business is, what it costs, the rules, the regulations, everything else that goes into it. So this usually takes several weeks. Once you get to that point, we get to the most important step, what I like to call step 2, and we call that the validation phase. So this is your chance to talk to the owners. That's usually broken into 2 options that you can do. In fact, I recommend doing both. Normally, the franchisor will have what they call group validation calls, where they will have their owners online with groups of prospective buyers, and the franchisees will answer questions. They'll tell you about their experience and so forth. But also, we want to talk one-on-one with the owners. We want to have our own private conversation. Maybe if we're in California or Arizona, we want to talk to owners in our market. We want to talk to successful owners and maybe owners that aren't doing as well. So what are we going to get in these validation calls? We're going to get some great information. First of all, would they make the same decision again? And that's really important. Secondly, are they happy with their franchisor? Are they getting the training and the support necessary? What does competition look like? How many hours do they put in on a daily or weekly basis? How long did it take them to break even where they're paying all the bills in the business? If they're a mature location, what kind of earnings are they making? And you'd be surprised. The owners will often tell you what kind of income they're actually making, or give you some kind of range of what they're making. And also, one of the things you want to look at is, what does it take to be a successful owner? And I tell people this is really important. So if you start talking to the franchisees that are successful and they're doing things you don't want to do, let's say they're going out in the field and they're networking and they're cold calling and they're meeting with clients on a daily basis, and they say, hey, that's what's necessary to make this business work. And you're one of those people that says, well, I don't want to do that. Well, this may not be a very good business for you. Also, on the other side, if we talk to people that are not doing well, why? Are they running the business part-time where really they should be running the business on a full-time basis? Are they hiring the right employees? What's going on with their location? How much money are they spending on marketing? Are they following the franchisor system? And so once we have enough validation calls, we will see what it takes to make the business work successfully, and maybe some of the things that may keep it from being successful. And that's why the validation phase is the most important. As we get farther into the process, usually a couple months in, that's usually when people want to go visit the franchisor. So sometimes this is done virtually, and sometimes, yes, it means getting on an airplane and going out and physically visiting that franchisor. Sometimes they call this Discovery Day, sometimes they call it Confirmation Day, sometimes they call it Meet the Team Day. But this is actually a time for you to meet the people that are running this business, possibly the founder, the CEO, the president of the company, all the department heads. And one of the things you're looking for is, do I like these people? Can I work with them for the next 10, 15, or 20 years? Do I think they have my best interests in mind, or are they just trying to sell me a franchise? And yes, they're looking at you too. They want to make sure you're going to be a good fit, that you're going to be successful. So it's really a time to get together. Usually it's a full day to get all the information that you need to make a qualified decision. But most importantly, are these people that I want to be quote unquote married to for the next 10 years plus? They are not going to ask you to sign documents or bring a check to Discovery Day. They are going to look at your information. They're going to look at how the day went, and then they're going to send you an invitation to become a franchisee. And that's then your time to decide if this is something you want to do or not. And usually they give you a few weeks to make that decision. But one of the things that we do during that time is we need to go to the final step, and we need to hire a professional franchise attorney. And this is really key. This 200-page FDD is written in plain English, and you are hiring an attorney not to negotiate that contract because it's not negotiable. The FTC does not allow any material changes in that contract. So some people say, well, then why would I hire an attorney? You're hiring an attorney to make sure you understand what is in that contract, what your obligations are, what the franchisor's obligations are, to look if there's any skeletons in the closet. Is there any litigation against the company? Have they had any bankruptcies? Are there any red flags that you need to know before signing this document? My strong suggestion is use a franchise attorney, of which I have many of. Do not use your cousin or your brother-in-law or a friend or something like that who's an attorney but is not well versed in franchise law. And I've seen people do that, and it either wastes a lot of time or money or gets people very frustrated. So the main advice I give people when you're hiring an attorney, make sure they have years and years and years of franchise experience. So now when we look at this, we've had, maybe a half a dozen calls with the franchisor. We've probably spoken to 8, 10, 12 franchise owners, both good owners and maybe people that aren't doing well. We've either had a virtual Discovery Day or we've flown out to visit with the company. And now we've hired an attorney to review all the documentation so we know what we're signing. And once we get to that point, that becomes the real big decision. And here's what I tell people. I've helped thousands of people just like yourself come to a decision they're comfortable with about whether or not they should buy this franchise. And I've been there myself. And the thing I always tell people is, no matter how much research you've done, no matter what your skill sets are in the work you're currently doing in your corporate life, it's still going to be a scary decision. And I know this because I've been there many times myself. But what I do is I sit down with my clients and I say, based on all the information you've gathered, based on all those conversations, based on speaking with the attorney and reading through all these documents, do you think this is a good, logical decision? And normally after 2 or 3 months, people will get to a decision they're comfortable with. And yes, sometimes the answer is no, and I'm fine with that. And I tell people, hey, maybe that was the right decision now. But if they decide, no, I think I'm going to move forward. And then I said, are you scared? And they'll say, yeah, I'm scared. And I'm like, good, that's normal. But the nice thing is you're making a good logical decision. And once you get past that decision, you won't look back and regret it. So I'm here to help with that, not just to help you find the right franchise for you, but also help you through the research. And the nice thing is, just like that real estate agent that helped you find a home, I don't charge for this. I get paid by the companies I represent. I don't get paid by you. So if you're looking for a really good, safe way, a way to mitigate risk, not just in finding the right franchise to look at, but also in how to research these franchises to get to a decision you're comfortable with, I'd be happy to help. So thank you for joining me with this episode of Own It. My name is Paige Nicol with FranNet. There'll be some information right after this episode if you want to get in contact with me. Thank you very much.